Good morning, everyone. We're learning Mishna is Erevin, Perek Yud, Chapter 10, Mishnah Ches, Mishnah 8. Elon, a tree, Shumeisach ala aretz, that is forming a covering over the ground. This is a tree that the branches are going down. They're starting out of the trunk and going down. So we say, and basically it's creating now this covering. It's creating like this little dome around the ground. Or not such a small dome, but it's creating a dome around the ground. If the end of the branches are not higher than 3 tfachim off the ground, they're not high actually 3 tfachim, they're less than 3 tfachim off the ground, then we are permitted to carry under it. So that means that we're looking at this enclosed area from the branches. The branches are considered walls. So this walled area now becomes a private domain, and you can go ahead and carry under it without any kind of issues. Now, the Mishna says, though, that the branches have to be 3 tfachim off the ground, less than 3 tfachim off the ground. That's because in halacha we have a concept called lavud, and that means that two things are next to each other, less than 3 tfachim from the ground. If it was open, it's considered closed. They're considered, when you have two things that are less than tfachim away from each other, they're considered like one. It's like they're filled, like they've come together. So therefore, if we have the walls, we have the branches rather, acting as walls, less than 3 tfachim off the ground, then we look at it as if the open space is not there anymore, and therefore I don't have a suspended wall. If we're talking about the ends of the branches are higher than 3 tfachim off the ground, that's a suspended wall, that's not a wall. But halachically we can say that this area is filled in. We consider it in halacha as if there is, as if the wall and the ground are together. So then we don't have a suspended wall, and therefore now we have proper walls enclosing this area. It's a private domain. But Rav adds that even if halachically I can look at this area as closed, nonetheless, if that wall is going to be moving back and forth in the wind, that's also not considered a wall in halacha. A wall that can be blown by the wind is not considered a wall. So therefore, although the space may be open, you need to tie it down to something. There's got to be something below that you can tie the wall down to make sure that the wall doesn't go back, doesn't move back and forth. And when you do that, then the wall is okay. So that's the first part of the Mishnah. Next, Sharash of Gavayim in Aretz. Now again, we spoke about a tree. Another Shabbos law about a tree. Sharash of Gavayim in Haaretz. You have a tree and its roots, as big roots, and they're off the ground. They rise off the ground, and they're Gavayim in Ar Shleisha Tvachim. They're 3 Tvachim off the ground. Got the roots on the ground, but they're high 3 Tvachim. The top of the root is high 3 Tvachim off the ground. Lo Yeshav Aleya. You may not sit on them on Shabbos. There is a halacha, there's a law on Shabbos that we may not use a tree. You can't lean on a tree. You can't climb a tree. That's because the sages were concerned that once you're using the tree, you may come to pull off a branch, and that would be a Torah prohibition of kotzer, of harvesting, of reaping, of cutting something off from where it grows. So therefore, they said no using a tree at all. So that translates here in the following. If the roots are less than 3 tfachim off the ground, the same concept as lavud, then we see the top of the root and the ground as one. If the top of the root and the ground is one, the same way I can sit on the ground, I can sit on the root. But once the root reaches 3 tfachim high, then that part cannot be seen anymore as being on the ground. It's too far off the ground. You don't have the concept of lavud, the concept of bringing it together. It's a separate thing by itself. Well, then if it's a separate thing by itself, it's not the ground, then it's a tree. If it's a tree, I'm not allowed to sit on it. Next, again, unrelated to what was before. Hadelas shebamuktzah, a door for a backyard. V'chadakim shebapirtza, or thorns that are used as a door or to close an opening in a breach in a fence. Umachtzalois, and reed mats that were used as used by doors. You cannot close up the door with them. What's happening is like this. All these are examples of doors that are not on hinges. Basically, they were a piece of, in the case of the board for the backyard, I don't know why they had it this way, but this is how they had it. It was a board, and there was a doorway, and you fit the door into the doorway when you were closing, and when you wanted to go out, you pushed it out. It's not hinged. The same with the thorns. They're not connected. They're just there. They're either there to close up the area, and when you want to go through, you push it and move it out. And the same thing with the reed mats. They weren't hinged. They were also used in this ways of fitting into the opening and pushing them out. So those kinds of doors, you cannot use them on Shabbos. You cannot close the area up on Shabbos, and that's because it's nira kibayna. It looks like you're building. It's a prohibition of building on Shabbos. And if I were to go ahead and let's say there'd be an opening in a wall, and I were to take something and set it in there, and I wanted it to set it in there because I want to now close up this area, that'd be building. So even though that's not what's happening now, it's meant to open and close. So therefore, according to Torah law, it's not considered building, but it resembles building enough that the sages said you cannot do it on Shabbos. So therefore, so when you're taking a door that just gets put in and taken out, that resembles building. Therefore, the sages said you cannot do it on Shabbos. Elim kain, unless gevayim in the arts, that these doors that we're talking about, these not hinged doors, are raised off the ground. It means if any of these doors we're talking about are raised off the ground in some way, then there won't be a problem of opening them and closing them. Why? Because the only way they can be lifted off the ground, even a minuscule amount, is if they're hung. If they're hanging on the doorway or at the opening, wherever it may be. If it's hung by the door, then already we see it's designated to be a door. People see it's designated to be a door. It's like any other door. Any other door, when you open and close it, there's no rabbinic restriction of doing that because it looks like you're building. It's a door. A door is meant to open and close. It's the doorway. Once these doors are in some way or another connected to the doorway, then that means it's clear that they're designated as the doors, and therefore it's clear they're a door. It doesn't resemble being like any other door, and in that situation, be able to use them to close and to open. Have a wonderful day.